And right now I'm going to turn things over to Rafael Gomez, the chair of our assembly and director of the Center for Industrial Relations, as well as his colleague Andrew Gibson, our program manager for the assembly. And they're going to take 10 or 15 minutes to introduce us to the policy options, our starting list, which you may have received. I think you did receive by email earlier this week. And after their introduction, we're going to break off into our first small group discussions of the day, where you'll have a chance to analyze and get to know some of these options, and of course, reconnect with each other. So Rafael, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I think you have just 2 or 3 minutes to get us started, and then please feel free to hand it directly right over to Andrew.
Thank you so much. I feel like I have all the wind taken out of my sails by hearing you and Tony Giles speak so eloquently about what the purpose is. I guess my task here, being the director at the Center for Industrial Relations at the University of Toronto, supporting, sponsoring this, and has created the opportunity for someone like Andrew, who I'm going to pass this over to in a minute, who left his very important role in the federal government at ESDC Canada to join us on this, is to maybe reinforce some of the things that I heard said that I want to reiterate for you all. And one of the things, especially, it's intimidating even for me actually to sit here and hear someone like Tony, who I looked up to during my scholarship and my training in this field, and to see someone who you meet in this process, Professor Roy Adams, who I can see here on the screen too, someone who I learned so much from. And I feel a little nervous here speaking on themes that I learned from them. So I hope I get it right. The main issue, and the thing I wanted to reiterate for all of you in this assembly, and I see my students here too, is that I think it's important not to prescribe the solutions based on what we already know and have and what we're going to discuss. They might turn out to be the places we want to go, institutions we want to look to enhance your ability as a citizen, as a worker, to have a say at work and to be part of very important decision making that happens at work. And by implication, have a say over how economic policy and decisions roll out in our country. And just to add, do you think experts know and get things right? Look at the mess our economy is in at the moment, okay? It's not that experts have all the tools and the knowledge, and this assembly is like a compressed way for you to learn about the right ways to bring about meaningful social and economic progress in this country. Rather, it's people like us, so-called experts, that have the opportunity to learn from you, because no knowledge is more important than that which is obtained on the shop floor, as we used to say. Now, work has changed. There are cubicles and there are offices and open plan workspaces, whatever you want to call it, but we'll just use the metaphor of the shop floor. Always the knowledge was contained there, and it bothered management and ownership to no end to know that you, the workers, knew more than them. And the whole sort of system of management was really, in one very important sense, designed to extract the knowledge that workers had on the basis of their day-to-day lived experiences and bring it within the realm of management experience knowledge, so that the power relationship inside of a workplace could sort of tilt back into management's favor. Think of originally a company or an organization being started by an owner-operator. Clearly, in that sense, whoever that was knew a lot about the job. But as soon as if they were lucky enough, their practice, their operation, their business grew, became more successful, they had to add people, right, to the mix. So the owner-operator became sort of farther and farther removed from the work that they were doing. That's the kind of system of economic capitalism we have now. We have management and upper echelons inside organizations that are quite far removed from what's happening on the ground every day in workplaces. And when you don't consult at the very minimum, right? Consultation is like the most minimal form of voice. It's saying, hey, we got this idea, workers, and we're going to do it. And we're just going to tell you about it before we implement it in case we haven't thought through some of the ramifications. By not even doing that, we step into mistake after mistake after mistake. And this happens at every level of organizational decision-making, even in economic macro decision-making. When you don't take account of those who are impacted by the decisions turn out to be less than optimal, shall we say. And that's being very generous. At worst, they can be destructive. So the work you're doing is actually quite important to situate these things we have on our screen right here, potential solutions to the problem of not having enough voice inside of a workplace, not enough input from employees about the very conditions under which they work in, but also, more critically, solutions to problems that even management hasn't thought through. So when going through these options, some of them you might even be familiar with. Well, we know because when we selected you as a representative group, we had to find people who have had some experience with trade unionism. So that was kind of one of our criteria. So we know unions, how they work, the system of collective bargaining is known to some of you. So that could be a solution that some of you think we just need to expand. On the other hand, I'm just guessing, there could be some of you who have had experience with those institutions of collective bargaining and trade unions and think, you know what, maybe not. My experience didn't sort of showcase the democratic aspects of collective bargaining as much as I would have hoped. I think we need something more, and that's great. And then there's a third group of you that I know exists, which has never been exposed to trade unions, and maybe this session into today in particular will allow you to find out more. And you might think, well, a reform to the things that have been done in the past with regards to trade unions might be the solution to giving workers more voice and a chance to make meaningful contributions to their working lives, but also, again, to the whole pattern of economic decision-making inside organizations and beyond. There's things that maybe should have been known to all of you, but aren't. Things that are statutory, right? And when we use those words, we're talking about things that are standards that everyone, in theory, should have exposure to and have some connection to. So thinking in the realm of health and safety in Ontario, we were a pioneer province in one important respect, in that we were the first jurisdiction almost in all of North America to introduce a health and safety committee system into what's a statutory right that every worker has. And we create a very innovative system called the IRS system, not to be confused with the American IRS, which is in the news lately. So apparently they're hiring 86,000 new IRS workers to collect taxes. No, IRS stands for Internal Responsibility System, and it is a system of joint responsibility for health and safety. It puts the onus not on the employer, not on government, and not on the worker, but rather all of them to ensure that there's a healthy and safe work environment. And our definitions of health and safety have also evolved over time. It used to be just eliminating slips and falls, and now we have a broader conception of what makes a healthy and safe workplace. And you, workers, are intimately involved in that process. A fancy word that we have for these kind of systems that involve government, employees, and employers is tripartite. And in a sense, you are part of these tripartite systems in every workplace that's covered by one of these health and safety regimes. And that basically covers all middle and large organizations in the province. Do they work as effectively everywhere? No. And again, even some of you who've worked a large part of your lives maybe have never really encountered a fully functioning, active joint health and safety committee. And that's a problem, because you should have. So the point is about these systems is they all work great in theory, but somehow, somewhere along the way, they sometimes leave gaps and missing pieces in practice. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, who will walk through the initiatives a little more specifically. My job, again, coming in as the sort of chair, is to sort of set the stage for you and to really make sure that you're not so worried about following some of these prescriptions or selecting them as if they were choices from a survey list. It's rather to be engaged, to learn about these systems, and then think in your, maybe from your own experience or what you've been exposed to here through the assembly, would these work in the context of the work that I know or that I've been exposed to? And I'll pass it on to Andrew, who then can also refer to me with anything on this list that I can add to.
Great, thanks so much, Rafael. And as everyone can see, we've got a passionate advocate and a real resource for all things around worker voice. So throughout the day, if we have any questions about the options, Rafael will be here to provide us more detail and background information and context from his research over the many years. And just to welcome everybody, it's great to see you all again since we last met in July. Just to really admire your dedication as volunteer citizens on this project. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some of the different options that we put forward, just so that you get a better feeling for them. We did send a document earlier this week, and there are many links there, and you can always go back to that. And there's videos, there's short articles, things that give you more of a flavor for what each of them are about. I do see that our time is moving on, and Richard, as I go through this, I've got about 10 or 12 minutes, but if you see that we're really falling back in our time, just give me like a 2-minute limit or something like that, and I can try to wrap things up a bit quicker. So on our slide that's currently up, we've essentially grouped these 15 policy options into 6 broad themes. And some of you might ask, where did these options come from? And basically, we've tried to do as best a job as we can to have basically gleaned what has been put forward from the community. And by community, I mean from a wide array of actors, going from labor lawyers to advocacy groups to unions, even academics. And so numerous people have put forward different kinds of proposals for improving the system, for trying to come up with a better way to solve this wicked problem. And so there's a lot of ideas out there, and we've tried to gather up a balanced number of them for you to look at and sift through. And then, your job will be to take those and say, okay, well, there's clearly something missing here, or there's some of these that just aren't important or relevant from our perspective and based on the values and concerns that we've articulated as a group. And so that's, what you'll be doing today and in the next session, really be digging into these different options. And so I'm just going to jump right into going through the different options. The first theme there you'll see as non-representational voice protections. And so these are the options that are laid out there are ones that don't require any intermediary group like a union that channels the voice of workers. So rather, in this case, the options have more to do with the direct expression of voice. The first one of these, it protects collective actions undertaken by employees. And this is something that exists in the US, and it's referred to as protected concerted activity. And what it does is it provides that workers are able to talk and discuss amongst themselves, for example, to compare their wages and other terms and conditions of their work. And it even protects them to bring forward proposals to their employers, say in the form of a petition, or more informally in the context of the workplace, just coming to their employer as a group and saying, we think this change needs to be made, or that adjustment is needed. And they're protected in doing that. They can't get fired for it. The second idea, the second policy option, is one that was raised during our September 2nd policy debate. And this is to enable workers the ability to use a workplace app that would give them a protected space for discussing and exchanging ideas. And this is sort of a virtual space where they could really engage with one another on what's happening in the workplace and have that back and forth that allows them to compare notes and to see what's to get a better sense of what's going on and what needs to be changed. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about this one because it was addressed in that policy debate, and you can go back and see that video. It's on the webpage for the initiative. The only thing I would say is that it's likely that protected concerted activity protections would cover this type of activity. I provided a resource in the document that was sent earlier this week, and it refers to a National Labor Relations Board, which is the board in the US, a ruling that says that protected concerted activity would protect activity on social media. And so there's likely already a movement toward this, but the two proposals, policy options 1 and 2, I think could dovetail quite nicely. Moving on now to the second thematic group, and this is what we're calling employer-supported voice schemes. These are arrangements where the employer voluntarily plays a role in helping to ensure channels or frameworks of worker voice. Option 3 is what you might call a soft recommendation. So there's no changes that would be needed to any laws, but it would be calling on employers or employer associations and chambers of commerce to promote a variety of voice models among their membership. You can see on slide 17 here, there's a number of different models that currently exist, like quality circles, self-managed work teams, peer review panels, that kind of thing. So, employers are already doing this, and there's already some momentum out there recognizing the importance of voice and how it not only improves, well-being for workers, but it also helps overall productivity for enterprise. And so the idea would be to build on that momentum and to create forums and places where employers can get together to share best practices, have HR teams work together to really leverage what's already out there and to go beyond it. Option 4 is a recommendation to provide incentives to companies to set up their own labor management models, as a number of non-unionized companies already do. So this usually involves the formation of an employee committee, which management would meet with on a regular basis to discuss worker concerns, and may even involve the opportunity to negotiate in a way that's similar to collective bargaining. In some cases, when these associations falter and employees feel that they're not legitimate, or they're not actually providing a channel for them to be heard, it can lead to efforts to unionize and take a more statutory channel. And this, I guess, you could refer to the WestJet situation over recent years, where there were such employee associations. Employees thought they weren't working, so then they led various union drives. There's a resource in the document about this case study. And an alternative one is Imperial Oil in Canada, which has had these joint industrial councils that it initiated like approximately 100 years ago, and that are still in existence, and that still work fairly well. So it can kind of go both ways, but certainly the opportunity for employers to take initiative and craft these kind of arrangements is helpful, and may be an endpoint in itself, or may be a jumping off point to workers taking things into their own hands following the statutory approach. The third block now is alternative bargaining arrangements, and I'm going to skim over this a little bit partly to save time, and partly also because we've got three experts, I should say, that are going to be coming in to talk about both of these policy options. But I'll just quickly say that both of them would require significant changes, statutory changes to the Ontario Labour Relations Act, and that's the law that provides a framework for collective bargaining in Ontario. Option 5 would be to provide collective representation rights to workers that are currently not able to achieve majority status, but are still interested in some kind of formalized protected arrangement for dealing collectively with their employer. This is sometimes referred to as minority unionism. There's an interesting case in this regard right now in the US, where some 20,000 Google employees are advocating quite loudly for some type of, they're advocating to create a union and to be in dialogue with their employer, Google, who has some over 200,000 employees. And so they don't have a majority, but they're still a very vocal force. And the question is, what kind of rights should they have? And I think critics say that they shouldn't have nothing. They should have something, but should they have the full suite that union members that succeed in getting 50% plus one have, or should they have some lesser suite? So that's a question that Professor David Dury will be getting to when he comes in a little bit later. Option 6, broader based collective bargaining. So this one, basically the idea here is that there's particularly in sectors that have historically been really difficult to unionize, following this 50% plus one model, the idea is there should be some ability to unionize across a sector, going beyond a workplace by workplace approach to unionization, where one workplace may be able to build on momentum that was created by another workplace. There may be a possibility to consolidate bargaining agreements, or even to extend them. And so there's various models that can be used here for broader based bargaining. And that, there's a lot of, I guess, a lot of interest and initiatives right now in the fast food and retail sector, everything from Starbucks to Chapters Indigo, fast food sector in California. So Professor Sarah Slynn will be in to talk to us about the different, I guess, sub options that can be taken in the broader based bargaining side of things. So the next block is what we're calling formal involvement in corporate governance. And this one would also involve significant legislative changes to the current existing model in Ontario. Let me skip ahead to option 9, works councils. And this is something that exists in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. And it's a fairly expansive approach that involves the election of work representatives at both the workplace level to discuss with management on a host of issues, and others to sit on the company's board of directors. We'll be hearing from Professor Roy Adams about how this model works. But what I'll flag here is that options 7 and 8 can, in a sense, be considered a lighter approach, or can be considered components of the Works Council approach. And so if you didn't want to go with a full-blown Works Council approach, you could have something like, a single option around having worker representation on company boards of directors, as was proposed by the Conservative Party of Canada in the last election when Aaron O'Toole was leader. Or you could focus rather on worker management committees at the establishment level. This is something that already exists for occupational health and safety, but that could be broadened out, or there could be other committees looking at other important matters in the workplace. I'll just look to Richard there to see how much time I have. Do I have another 3 or 4 minutes?
2 to 3.
2 to 3? Okay, great. So moving on to the next block, internal union democracy. And here there was quite a bit of allusion to this during the policy debate on September 2nd. And the idea is that, we're talking about worker voice and all the ways in which this needs to be facilitated in workplaces, but within unions themselves, which sometimes are fairly large bureaucratic organizations, there's also frustration by some workers that felt that their rights aren't being adequately represented. And so you could take a soft approach to this problem and recommend that union federations and unions more generally ensure more diverse opportunities for the members to speak out and to participate so that they can fully benefit from union representation. Or you could take a stronger legislative approach, which is option 11 there, that would mandate more stringent requirements than currently exists. Such things as a democratic code of conduct that would be more detailed than the current duty of fair representation that exists in labor legislation. So those are, again, 2 contrasting approaches, one being softer, having to do with promotion, and the other one having to do with making amendments to existing laws. And then the final block is other voice enabling approaches. And there are 4 of them here. The first one is a softer one, and that would be to recommend that governments, employers, and unions actively campaign for the elimination of racism, discrimination, and workplace bullying. If those are present in your workplace, and it's obviously very hard for people to feel that they can freely express their ideas and views. The second one is a statutory one, and it would basically involve bringing in something that exists at the federal level, and that's what's known as unjust dismissal protections. And the idea here being that in Ontario, you can get fired for a whole host of reasons, and your employer doesn't have to tell you what those reasons are. Whereas at the federal level, you have to be given just cause, or if you ask for it, you have to be given just cause, and that's usually linked to your performance. And so that kind of protection provides a bit more confidence in the workplace that workers can bring forward their ideas. They can say, this needs to be changed, or that needs to be changed, and they won't have to worry, at least not as much, about that having an impact on their job security. Number 15, collaborative agreements and processes between labor law enforcement agencies and worker centers. And so the background here is that there's huge problems to enforce the minimum standards that currently exist in labor law, whether you're talking about overtime pay or minimum wage. a whole host of issues being paid on time, that kind of thing. And there just isn't enough enforcement officers in the Ministry of Labor. And this is not a problem that's unique to Ontario, but there's always a huge backlog of complaints. And so it's a question of trying to enforce the laws that already exist. And one interesting initiative that's been taken up south of the border in Los Angeles is the idea of deputizing worker designates from things like worker action centers. And we're going to hear from Dina Ladd from Worker Action Center Toronto later today. And so you could deputize workers from those kind of centers, other kind of labor organizations that would play a role in co-enforcing existing norms and laws, I should say. And then the last one, number 14, is the expansion of coverage of labor law to include groups that are currently excluded, such as vulnerable independent contractors. Gig workers is I would say the number one group that's typically referred to here. Should note that Ontario did pass legislation providing stronger protections for these workers earlier this year, although some say that that didn't go far enough. And just one example is that there could be more clarity around their ability to unionize, which is still in a bit of a gray zone. So apologies for having to rush through these options, but I did want to give you a flavor for each of them. And again, this is just a starting point, but I think there's a lot for you to chew on there and to broaden out based on your own experiences. And so now I'll hand it back to Richard to continue on.